Hello, I'm David Cook, Director of National Security for ShadowDragon. January is National Human Trafficking Prevention Month. In order to bring more attention to the topic, we spoke with Matt Richardson, Senior Advisor of Intelligence and Child Safety at the Anti-Human Trafficking and Intelligence Initiative, or ATII, and Head of Intelligence at the Canadian OSINT Center. We were also joined with ShadowDragon CEO Daniel Clemens and the CTO Elliott Anderson. We are passionate about this issue and use our open source intelligence platform and tools to prevent and identify trafficking in online marketplaces alongside law enforcement authorities through groups like ATII. We do that because it is our duty as citizens and parents to prevent this illicit activity and protect the next generation. This is part one of a three-part series on human trafficking in online marketplaces. I have to warn listeners. Some of the content discussed around trafficking of children can be disturbing to some people. With that, please share this information. It may save lives. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ShadowDragon Podcast, Season 4, Episode 2. This is the end of January, but January is National Human Trafficking Prevention Month. This is on the back of a ShadowDragon and CACI Dark Blue Intelligence Suite webinar that we did on human trafficking. Shout out to Kristen Carpenter, who did a great job. Please reach out to us if you want to see the webinar. We'll put those in the show notes. Today we have Matt Richardson from the Anti-Human Trafficking and Intelligence Initiative, ATII. Great organization that we and Dark Blue both have partnerships with. Matt is an expert in open source intelligence and dark web monitoring. He has done extensive investigations in the past, is a professor who speaks on all these topics. Matt, I really wanted to learn about the documentary Dark Highway, so we'll get to that here in a second. But if you will notice, I have to say, uh, the man, the myth, the legend, Nico Dakins is not here today. I'm David Cook from ShadowDragon, Director of National Security. We have Dan Clemens and Elliott Anderson. I'll kick it over to you guys for a little introduction.
Hey, this is Daniel Clemens, and I'm the founder of ShadowDragon. I spent a lot of time on long-term investigations, insider threat stuff, um, some exploit development, and other things over the years. But now I'm really just helping the team run the business, and happy to be on the podcast.
I'm Elliott Anderson. I've been working with Dan for many, many, many years. I run all the technical and engineering operations at ShadowDragon. So anything that's going through our technology goes through the teams that I run. So it's a very entertaining experience for sure.
Matt.
As David mentioned, my name is Matt Richardson, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Intelligence and Child Safety with the ATII, and also the Head of Intelligence for the Canadian OSINT Center. I've been involved in this work directly for closing in on 5 years. The areas I tend to focus my time and energy on are those that affect children. So that's child sex trafficking, exploitation, people that would do harm to children tend to be where I focus my efforts. I do want to take a moment humbly to thank all of you with Shadow Dragon, as well as my friends with CACI Dark Blue Suite, for having me on today and enabling the mission and our work with your amazing tool sets.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's
awesome.
great to have you. Um, Matt, let's dive right in. So tell us a little bit about ATII and how you got involved in this line of work.
Certainly. Well, the ATII is an organization. We are an NGO headquartered out of North Carolina, the United States of America. We are involved in multiple lanes in the space of anti-human trafficking. We advocate for policy legislative change. We collaborate with corporate America and financial institutions, law enforcement, and other NGOs, with the mission being to mitigate, hopefully eradicate the crime of human trafficking. Myself, as mentioned, my role, How I got into this was I just simply became a father. Believe it or not, it's 14 years since I've had my first child. And it just seems everything changes when you have children if you're engaged and present as a parent. And I started getting interested in protecting my kids online as they get older. And I started taking OSINT courses through Toddington. And within a couple of years, I was teaching internet safety at schools. And I was recruited into the industry January of 2021 by my friend and peer, Larry Cameron. To which point I just moved through the ranks a bit. I was on the task force, and I was the director of intelligence. Today, I find myself as the senior advisor intelligence in the child safety aspects of it. But my day to day is spreading the good work that my agency work does. We're raising awareness of human trafficking, safety tips for parents, as a part of what I do. But as a day to day, I find myself directly involved in coordinating complex, multi-jurisdictional international investigations. Again, typically on the crime of child sex trafficking and child sexual exploitation online and on the dark web.
Yeah.
That's a
Um,
lot, and moving at a fast velocity since 2020, I'm sure, you know.
Uh, there's a lot of weight in that. I became involved actually in the fall of 2020, so it was already in high gear. And man, oh man, when I joined the agency, they're like, we're doing like 4 times as much as we were pre-COVID, and I believe it. And it has not slowed down, unfortunately. I think if anything, I'm busier than I care to be. I wish I could retire. It ain't happening, unfortunately.
Yeah, and how was that shift for you? Just kind of getting thrown into the deep end of a pretty murky industry with a pretty heavy topic, you know? Like what was that like for you personally?
Um, it's a really good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that, but I'm told I swim in the deep end. So I kind of went from not doing any of this to the very worst of them, like the worst of the worst. Surreal.
Yeah.
Absolutely feels some days like I'm watching myself on TV. It still does. You never really get fully used to it. You get acclimated, but um, sometimes it's really dark, or something fairly mundane to me will become dark very quick. It certainly has its moments of exhilaration. It always is rewarding. It has its days where it takes a lot out of you. You do know when you do this what you're signing up for, I think, but you don't know. So yeah, there's certainly are days where I get a ping or something, and I know what I'm about to do is going to leave me never the same again. So, I would say as well, though, it's made me a better person. So, experiencing, in my opinion, some of the worst recesses of humanity and its urges and inclinations, has brought me into close contact with the very finest examples of humanity that are going. So I count myself
Mhm.
fortunate for that. And finally, it can be tough, but in my mind, I've always regarded this as a privilege because very few get to do it at the levels that I'm able to experience. So I don't know. I regard this as a sacred obligation to public safety. Not many can do it. A lot of people don't know what's going on. I can, and therefore I take my obligation to protect as best I can very seriously.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for jumping in the deep end. This is, you know, we all know how gritty some of this is. You gotta have to, you know, take some of your breaks every now and then, but thank you for, you know, what you're putting your hand to.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
With that, Matt, can you walk us through kind of, how you approach this and some of the roles in publicly available information and open source intelligence and talk to us like we have no idea what human trafficking is.
Okay, so now. I beg your pardon in advance if I hit a rabbit hole or two. This is a
We
complex
go
one.
down,
I
we
am
go
no.
down the rabbit holes. It's okay.
Yeah, we never do that on podcasts here ever.
So I'm gonna fit right in and welcome home, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it just varies. There's a lot of variables. I'll keep this simple as I can, but at some points, we're invited by law enforcement government agencies to assist with an investigation that's open and ongoing. Other times, we'll do proactive work. So we'll go out and we'll do some targeting. So in the latter, I'll give one example. I think this one would let me give two. In one, the Alabama World Games, kind of like the Super Bowls, will run discrete operations on those. And I'll preface what I'm about to say. None of my investigations or those of my peers that are non-sworn law enforcement seek, view, disseminate, download, or otherwise consume child sex abuse material or CSAM. It doesn't happen. It's strictly prohibited. It's illegal. So that's not a part of the mission. And it's not something that we're running into on a regular by any stretch of the meat. And you really don't need to do what we do. So back to the World Games. Oh, sorry, one other thing. We don't do chat ops. We might help point law enforcement to viable targets or potential victims, and then they take the ball from there.
When
Right.
you say
So
chat ops, you mean basically chatting with either predators or bad folks to elicit a response. Is that what you're talking about?
correct. Or potential victims, like we don't have any contact. We don't take the ecosystem. And there's good reasons for that. There's quite a bit of training that goes into UC ops for law enforcement. So I understand it's a separate certification. So, but I mean, just for example, there's a lot of rules and laws and regulations around entrapment that I'm not privy to. I'm a Canadian and I'm not legally trained. Or, you could inadvertently taint an ongoing investigation, say 12 months in. So there's a lot of reasons that we don't do that. But we don't need to. We're very good at when we stay in our lane, which we do, we're effective in that, and we have the trust and respect of our partners, law enforcement and beyond, for reasons that include that and the results that we can get. So with the World Games in Alabama, a couple of years ago, what we would do, for example, okay, we have Birmingham, so we have a location. So location's a nice thing to start with. If you do targeting like completely proactively, you have no idea where they're going to be. That's kind of one of the last things typically I find out is, are they criminal? And then you start narrowing hopefully a location and an identity in these things. With Alabama, we had Birmingham as a jurisdiction. So then we start with Birmingham. We do a little geo analysis to cherry pick some of the bedroom communities that are closely, within say a 3-hour drive, because people are going to be there to catch the games. But the hotels are booked in the downtown, so they have to book just outside. So we set up some locations. We determined the date filters. So we started about 7 to 10 days prior to the start of the games, because the people were already starting to populate, the sound technicians, the staff, the athletes, the coaching staffs, and all that. We're starting to already get in there. And we ran it all the way through about a week after. So we had a location, we had locations and date time frames. What we then did in that particular case, and it doesn't quite work the same as now as it did then, but we were Google dorking the sites. So we picked something like 4 of the top escort ad sites. And we would do the site, and then we would put in the dates and certain keywords that would indicate, for example, a minor. We were targeting minors in this particular operation. So for example, you would have, site:/escortalligator.com. Then we'd have I think it was July 2022 or 3, I forget. But then we put in something like braces, new, fresh, innocent, maybe an emoji or two, the airplane emoji. We play with keywords and emojis. So instead of getting something like, I don't know, 1,700 hits, we were getting like 4. And then we would go in. I remember one we used was DDLG, which would stand for Daddy Dom Little Girl, which is not everybody that's into that fetish is pedophilic or committing a crime, but it is one of those ones known to be, because it is a mature male in a sexual relationship with a minor female, as popularized in the book Lolita and the movie 97 Jeremy Irons. So we would get something like 3 or 4 ads, and we would drill into those ones. And then if we saw images in there where we thought, okay, what are we looking for indicators? No, none of them are bulletproof. If you're looking for smoking guns, wrong crime for you to investigate. This is a murky one, as we mentioned earlier. But if you look at the totality of the circumstances, okay, do they appear young? Are they very slender? If they're holding a phone or a pop can, does it look oversized in their hand? Um, do they lack body hair but no signs of hair removal like redness or stubble or irritation? If they're standing near a kitchen counter or a doorknob, is it really high on them? Because countertops and doorknobs, I've been taught, are typically about 38 inches. It's a fire code thing. So that might indicate, well, the person is of a very short stature, well below 5 feet. There's no hip spread if it's a female. There's no development in the chest. Additional ones, if it's like a really dirty, messy looking hotel room, If the pictures were taken by a third party, it's pretty obvious. If they're derogatory pictures, that's another indicator. And again, not smoking gun. Some people on their own free um, will do this. But when you start adding up the check boxes and you're hitting 7, 8, or 9 out of 10 or 12 of these, then you have something that needs to be looked at. Um, Finally, the other thing we would do is we would like, grab the ad, like the message in it, and like the written part, and then dork it. And if it pings to, in one case, I remember 1,100 ads. So that's not somebody that one person there as an individual under their own free will and accord. There had to been some level of management, if you will, or centralization. So the
Hmm.
same exact ads popping up in like 17 different American cities and two Canadian ones for that matter within 3 days of the one in Alabama. And when we can see stuff like that, then we go to law enforcement with a workup. So that's an example of one that we came into at the request of law enforcement to help prioritize potential traffickers as well as victims that needed recovery.
Yeah, Matt, one of the things we've seen in in your research is identical to what you just said. When you see the same ad or a very
Hmm.
similar ad posted, you went through every single point that I've seen before too. It's is it someone else taking the picture and that kind of stuff. But from our side of things, from an OSINT perspective, we have the the aspect of being able to see multiple places that have the same thing and correlating
Hmm.
that. That's really powerful. But another thing that's really powerful too is these guys can't get infinite burner phones. They can't get infinite cash apps. They can't get infinite Venmos or whatever they're using, whatever they're using to do this. So a lot of times in those investigations, we like to teach investigators and analysts to look for take that WhatsApp, take that, whatever it is, and then see who it is. What does the picture look like? If it's not the same person, that's really, really obvious that you've got a problem. And phone numbers are the same way. Like I said, they don't go to 7-Eleven and buy like 400 phones. They buy, four or whatever they buy. And so when you see another thing you can see is ads that have the same phone number, the same set of emojis, and then a WhatsApp account that's really similar. It might be like, big boy 223, and then the next one's like big boy, 512 or whatever. And it's really obvious that you're dealing with not an individual, but you're dealing with a trafficker. And so that's one of the things we've seen from our OSINT research. I think it seems simple and straightforward, but it's powerful. It's a powerful, it's a relatively easy way to connect the dots there. So
Yeah, I would say, and just for some background, Matt, we put together anti-human trafficking targeting classes. I think the first one I put together was like 2014, 2015, and our the way that we kind of push things was like is very target centric, right? So for each of the ads, and at the time there's probably maybe 4 or 5 different places where ads were. Now there's a lot more, there's way more back page-ish like sites, as well as what you guys have been covering, some of the dark web marketplaces that are emerging. But um, I think that the most easiest way to like prioritize something in a geographical area was looking at the like who was taking the picture, like what you said, what's the position of the picture, what's in the background of the picture, what are the elements in the background that could identify is this the same type of hotel, kind of, chain, or is it, um, a VRBO, kind of helps you kind of differentiate a little bit. And then also like, um, one of the things I looked for mostly was like, was if this is a person, you know, even under the age of 30, what's the probability of them moving between a lot of different locations? EGB, and then are those locations kind of on a highway system? You know what I mean? Like, or just across the United States, that's a big indicator. Like, how are they getting the money for this? And then, looking at the looking at their eyes. That's the main thing that I would look for is, for prioritization. Like if there was a deadness in their eyes, kind of, And then if you could find historical pictures as well, that's really helpful because you can see kind of it's pretty sad, but just this degradation and despair kind of growing, right? Um, and then the next thing would also be looking for other type of indicators of tattoos or even sometimes brandings and whatnot, Um, so that's kind of what our process was, and then very specifically with phone numbers was I think a long time ago people stopped. They're gonna use some burner phones on some things, but really the folks that are pushing more control in this whole trafficking or pimpology type kind of strange trafficking theology is as much control over the victims as possible. So I would look for the indicator that they have a phone, but they're only using probably the data portions or Wi-Fi versus a real, it's not really a phone, So, and how do we do that? Like in our tool, like we go and try to look for little clues around, well, what's the carrier of that phone? And if it's like a voice over IP or Google or something that looks like an application, then that mixed with the other things is an instant prioritization. And as especially if there's a Cash App tied to the phone number as well, or something like Cash App or Venmo, where there's going to be money being able to be accepted to a phone. You almost have the whole ecosystem of just check, 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 check. Okay, these ones are being trafficked. The other ones are just workers. Um, so that's kind of my high level after um, doing that a lot and having a lot of failures where like some of the processes we were using, we come to find out like wow, some of this facial recognition is cool, but 8 times out of 10 it doesn't necessarily help us, even though it sounds cool.
Well, if I could add this, Daniel, I love the point you made there. It's one of the first things I was taught. Well, number one, this is human trafficking, not
Yeah.
narcotics or arms trafficking. So there's a lot of human factors, which makes it complex. So the point you made about the eyes, one of the first things I was taught are they smiling from here down, right? Because the eyes are very revealing. And to your point, I remember one of the Bama cases. Actually, it might have been one of the ones out in Arizona. But I found somebody that I was like confident. There's a level of trafficking involved here. There was bruises on her. The tattoos were pretty consistent with what we might see in the industry. We'll just say that. And
Hmm.
I've been able to find an old Instagram account, and you could literally, as you said, see the decline in the human over a period of about 10 months. So it's like the account was here, and over the 10-month period, you could kind of see new tattoos appearing, change of dress, like style of clothing. She looked like she'd aged in that 10 months a fair bit, kind of like I did the first 10 months I've been doing this work. So, but yeah, it's those things that make it so hard to conduct them. It's some things can be automated and some things come down to the human touch, like you described, Dan. I was glad that you brought that up.
Thank you. That's yeah, it's just and then taking breaks, right? You can't do this every day.
Yeah. Um, man, this is a tough conversation to have sometimes.
And I'm surprised you were in Birmingham. Like that's where our headquarters was. You should have stopped by during that time.
Shall I find myself out that way? I will ping you, sir, and I would love
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
We need to
invite.
have we gotta have Matt down to DC and all you guys up and we'll put something together. Um
Count me in.
yeah. Uh so Matt, the last time we talked and Ellie and Dan, we've talked a lot about this, is some of the TCPs or tactics, techniques, procedures that we've seen to move people to being trafficked, and a lot of it was moving folks from open chats or forums into either encrypted or dark web chats. Can you
Hmm.
speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I'll let
So
Matt go. I have a little contrasting perspective probably, but You know, it's
I'll say my piece and right over to you, Daniel, because
yeah,
it's a fairly straightforward answer, to be honest. Traffickers or predatory actors, because they're all predators, just different
yeah.
motivations, different TTPs and procedure. But where do they go? Well, they go where, let's say, the kids or the young women are. So prior to the internet, I grew up in the 80s. I'm an 80s kid. We didn't have the internet, but we had arcades and shopping malls and playgrounds. Predators went there because the kids were there.
Mm.
Um, Ted Bundy type of predators went to nightclubs because there were attractive young women there. This is not rocket science. So online, the same rationale holds. These are crimes of opportunity and these are target-rich environments. So Instagram, TikTok, Roblox, I'm not picking on any of them. They all have their own shortcomings for this purpose, but they will go to where the kids or the young ladies are, or whatever their target is. It starts fairly mundane in my experience, and we all experience this differently. This is my lived experience and mine only, but I don't think it's uncommon. They will approach the kids. Let's say a trafficker approaches a 13-year-old female. Now, what I've seen them do is they'll look at the profile, whatever's available, and they'll discern things like if dad's in none of the pictures, then they'll maybe try to be a fatherly figure, the protector that's not in their life. If the kid has low self-esteem, they're going to use flattery, how beautiful they are. They don't get you the way I do. Like they're going to use classic grooming techniques in
Hmm.
order to gain some level of trust. So that can begin on the comments with a positive comment or two of like flattery before it gets moved to the DM or the private messaging feature within, let's say, Instagram. Or again, I'm not picking on them. It's one we all know. Once they're in there, it's called pushing. They'll try to push them over to dark social, meaning not monitored, encrypted, which WhatsApp, Signal,
Hmm.
tools that many of us use. And from that point, the crime could take its major in a variety of ways. Like certainly it can go the more Craigslist route where they're booking hotel rooms and posting ads on escort sites. Today's day and age, it can be paid live streams where a customer can go on and DIY their own pornography for an X amount of money, or to platforms that adult creation content like OnlyFans and others like it, Fansly. Um, where I see the dark web involved in the
Hmm.
continuum is some of the content can end up on there because if they're booking sexual appointments with Johns and they're 12, 13, that content you can't just put on a typical adult site because if they're obviously a minor and they're going to get caught, it's going to get removed. So where that gets put on the dark web is because it's illicit, right?
Mm.
And they can remonetize that victim, so they
Yeah.
get the money for the physical, and then they're remonetizing. So that's one scenario. Now, if the trafficking, if it's child trafficking, yes, I've seen brokers and traffickers that are not familial traffic kids, unfortunately, more times than I care to recall right now. But more typically, at least in my experience in North America, is it's familial. And so it's like somebody with access to the kids, like a father, a mother, a step parent, a close family friend who will arrange physical contact appointments with the kids or live streams. And so the dark web with that is you can book physical appointments and or live streams and or access content. And the reason that dark web's
Dude.
harder to access, less user friendly, but it has to be there because it's illicit, right?
So that's so crazy. I have a lot of questions. Like, um, I like, where do you think these guys are getting this, like, kind of this progression, like this standard operating procedures for all those things that you mentioned, like, differentiating between the illicit stuff and then the normal trafficking, and then moving them off to another platform, and then moving them to like an encrypted thing, like. Where do you think they're getting that training? Are there manuals out there? Is there some influencer out there that's pushing these things? Where is that coming from?
Well, two answers. One is I think part of it's common sense. If it was 1983 and I was at a shopping mall and I wanted to lure an 11-year-old girl away, I might offer a photo shoot because what I ultimately want to do is something like a sexual assault. It's illegal, but I have to have privacy to facilitate the crime. So in the real world, I might say, "Hey, why don't you come to my studio and we'll do a film shoot?" Because I can't really do anything and
Mm,
record at a mall. So I think part of that is that, but then I'm not sure. I know there are names floating around out there that seem to be more prominent than others that, for example, they do write guides.
Mm-hmm.
So how to groom, how to threaten, how to manipulate and groom the mother to get to the kids. Like for example, a single mom dating online. There are guides on that and how-tos, how to facilitate an abduction of a child, sexual assault, and then get away with the crime. There are manuals for that. There's also forums. So there's forums where kind of like I'm going to put it in like real normal people context. If I'm a aficionado of fish aquariums, mine's over here, I might join a community of people that are like-minded, and we share tips for keeping our aquariums clean, what types of fish you can have together, and on and on. Well, they have similar forums for those that are interested in the sexual abuse of minors, and or the trafficking and profiteering of minors, young women into the sex trade. So yes, they share tips and tricks, and they do have publications, and there are a few of them that are more active, I'd say for sure in those circles than others, but that's how I've seen it, or that's what I have seen.
Wow. The when you mention the live stream stuff, that's so crazy. I haven't come across that. Just, I'm not doing this all the time anymore, but that seems really crazy. Just to think about, like, family members are willing to make money on the weakest part of their family, kind of like, is that is that crossing different, familial ethic or ethnic groups, or is it, you know, where are you seeing that? Is there any clustering of things around that? Like what's the highest frequency around that?
Um, to me, the most common denominator is poverty or financial gain. So if what a common scenario is Western men will, uh, like through a variety of methods, forums, foreign dating sites, will
Hmm.
find impoverished families in, let's say, the Philippines. That's unfortunately a common source country. So the Western male will send like pretty small amounts of 30, 40 US dollars to the Filipino family, who will then 30 minutes, 45 minutes with their son or daughter. And then the Western male will DIY their the CSAM, record it for later use, that kind of thing. Sometimes they'll sell that on the dark web too. Where when I've seen it in North America and in more Western countries, they're it, if women are involved, I know there's pedophilic women, but the ones I've seen more often is the financial gain. So it could be poverty. Often it could be an addiction to drugs.
Hmm.
They're expensive habits. Um, where with males, if they're trafficked them, it can be financial, it can be a sexual motivation, or often both. So they enjoy it, but then they're profiteering as well. Um, so again, it's complex, but those when it's children, that's what I've seen it. I've seen examples of brokers and traffickers who are not a part of that child's family, but these are usually in regions where kids can go missing and there's not really any questions asked. But law enforcement might not be as strong. There's more poverty. We see war zones and there's a lot of displacement, disruption in societal structures and
Hmm.
infrastructure that enable that type of thing. So, but when we're thinking with North America, it's typically familial, often drug driven or financially driven.
Right.
Your final point, as far as like familial values and ethics and like the structure of a family, the children are the backbone. Your children, I can't imagine it myself. That's one of the things I can't really imagine at this point is how you put your children in harm's way for some selfish need. Work four jobs if you need to, but or quit, like, try to kick the habit. Personally, I can't understand that, but I can't not think, and for the life of me, a bigger betrayal on society and these
Yeah.
children that we're entrusted to raise and give them a childhood and ensure that they're healthy and safe and have a happy life and these things. I can't imagine anything more abhorrent.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
with you. The deviance there and depravity is so just unrecognizable. Like, why have kids? Right.
yeah.
Like, that's so crazy. Like, I'm really sorry to keep being like going down this rabbit hole, but so, like, Matt, how are you? Okay, so you've, spent X amount of time during the week. This is not a normal 8 to 5 thing. How are you, coming out of that? You got to do some extraordinary stuff probably on a personal level. Like it almost seems like you need to get baptized every week or something, Like how does that like how are you refreshing yourself from some of this personally? Like how can our audience know you and know like this isn't just heroism. This is a your heart on the line. Like how do you protect your heart?
No, I'm full of, but I'll be very honest about it. I think we have to talk about this. There's no shame in it. If I played football, I'd probably have knee injuries and I'd have to do physio and stuff. And then if I'm a quarterback, my mind's my right arm. Um, actually, I had a fairly substantial traumatic incident when I was in the United States, May of 2023, teaching at a gang police conference on child sex trafficking and the nexus with gang activity and drugs and that. And it took me a little while. I mean, I can remember a really rough 10, 12 weeks in there. I remember thinking, I wish it was just a migraine or sciatica pain in my back. We all know how horrible that would be. But
Hmm.
I remember thinking, whatever I've done in my life, I've paid 10 times back. I did pull through it. I have a fantastic therapist, and I keep my appointments like clockwork. Even if I don't
Hmm.
feel I need it, I stay ahead. I have found a lot of comfort and peer support. So if
Yeah,
I'm having a bad day, I can go to one of mine, and we've been in the field, and I don't have to pillow it because I won't tell my therapist the dark stuff. I'll talk more about symptoms for having like symptoms that my central nervous system's off, or I'm too low, I'm too up, and in
right,
self-care. So how to manage that. So if my hands are shaking and my breathing's labored, I'm like, okay, I got to slow down. I don't know why, but I've got to pause here. And
right.
then she gives me method for getting better. Self-care. My peers, I will talk about the more the nitty-gritty, and we can laugh while we're doing that because that's what people like us often do. We try to find the dark sense of humor. You've heard of that.
Yeah, you
Um,
gotta shake it off.
yeah. You mentioned baptized every week. It's weird. People don't do this, won't understand. Some of those that do will, but sometimes I feel the need to profusely wash my hands, or I'll be like, holy cow, I've had 4 showers today, and I'll be like, oh yeah, okay. Um, Self-care is really important for me. So I have the fish tank. I like mellow stuff. I have
Yeah,
friends who like stock car racing or dirt bike motocross. Me, I like to slow things down. So I have my fish. I do vegetable gardening.
yeah,
Um, I'm a foodie. I cook scratch meals for my family and listen to like James Taylor and Gordon Lightfoot, really mellow music.
yeah,
I stay away from anything violent on television. Where a lot of people will watch like horror action films and stuff. I like silly comedies or reruns of Seinfeld. Real,
yeah. I'm
yeah.
feeling you. I'm feeling you on that. I've had to really like I can't watch as many violent movies anymore. I never was a horror movie guy, but I feel you on the any kind of violent movie. I'm like, whoa, that's like affects me way more now. Like
Mhm.
it's a strange it's strange.
I think of some of the stuff I used to watch, like before doing it, I'm like, I could never watch or read that now. Because people ask me, "Hey, have you ever checked out Dark Web Diaries and things like that?" I'm like, I don't need to. No, but did you watch Family Guy last night? That's me. I'm like, no, I keep it really light. And if I think I just want to say anybody out there. Um, it, I didn't know what this was when it happened to me. It was a friend of mine. I called her one day. I'm like, "Hey, Jeannie, and if you're tuning in, Jeannie, I love you, and I really appreciate you."
Is that
Yeah, she told me she was a former like retired law enforcement officer, and she goes, "Oh, okay, you've experienced
she's
this."
cool. Hey Jeannie.
Jeannie, oh, we all know Jeannie.
Yeah, she's great.
One of my see Jeannie is one of mine in the field who, without question, I can go to, and Julie as well. If you're listening, Julie, I have a handful of I can go to, and they can come to me, and I can't even begin to say how important that is. But if you feel like you're doing this and something's not right, you may not understand. I didn't know what was going on, but someone pointed it out to me, and then Jeannie and Julie, for example, would be like, "What's your plan? What's today going to look like for you? What are you going to do? What are you going to not do?" And then they would ping me periodically with a status check. So it's having each other's back, and that's what I mean with the camaraderie. Horrible stuff. Um, Horrible, horrific stuff, horrific people involved. But if you step back and look at the grand scheme of things, it's
Yeah.
bringing you the best to you do the best of the world and the best in the world to you. And if we could take solace in that, um, if sorry, I don't mean the rabbit holes here, but when I get talking about this, your mind goes in every direction. I really
Yeah.
want people with an idea of kind of my experience with it. So if you're having it, you know what to do. You won't know what to do, but talk to someone you trust is a really good starting point, as I did with Jeannie. That's where my journey started. Compartmentalizing is really important for me too. So if I'm doing the darker, some of this isn't dark, it's administrative, but if I'm doing the dark stuff, I of course don't do it when my children are anywhere around, even if they're not in the room.
Yeah.
I don't want to associate this with that. I don't do the work in my bedroom or living room. I try to find a space in the house that I really only do this stuff in that. So I try to contain the physical environment. If I'm looking at images or watching videos that are disturbing, again, there's no CSAM in this equation, but you can see some very dark and violent stuff that's not CSAM as a part of the work. If you're able to turn the color off, make so it's black and white, that seems to help, and that's a tip I've heard others utilize. And if you have the luxury of muting it or going without the audio, sometimes you have to have the audio, but
Yeah.
I find makes it more intense. So if
It's
you
very
can't,
interesting. It's incredibly interesting you say that, Matt, because no one ever taught me to do that. But the audio, if I don't have to listen to it, really helps. Um, but I wanted to actually, you're talking about, secondary STS or secondary traumatic response. And I think, uh, I think what you're describing is something that actually, I'm taking this a little bit of a different direction, but I think it's one of the reasons my camera's messing up. Sorry, guys. I think that is one of the reasons in the industry or in the world we're in that people don't want to actually do this stuff. It's way easier to kick a door in. It's way easier to search a car. It's way easier to do an investigation on something else. And one of the things that I've found is a massive problem with why this isn't being focused on enough and there's not enough money is what you're describing. It's incredibly stressful. It's very hard to deal with. And I think that the systems to help people with that stuff, you are saying it very clearly. You have your therapist, you have the people that are doing the same thing. But if you start describing the stuff to other people, they will flip out. I mean, they'll get angry. I mean, you probably can do it, and they'll be like, "I want to kill that guy," and they just get angry and upset. And it's like, well, no, there's an important investigation. We have to, figure this
Yeah.
out. And the industry is, when I say the industry, I just mean the world as a whole. Let's take North America, like we were talking about as an example. We spend oceans of money on drug trade and fraud and stuff. And we
mm,
don't spend nearly as much on what you're doing. And I think part of that is because a lot of people just don't want to do it. And, I think the systems to help with that are an important part of that. Uh, and I think the more people that understand that there is a way to handle it, the black and white, turning off the audio or whatever it is that helps you with it is extremely, extremely important to doing a really good job with that investigation. And and on also there's also you have to have a broad spectrum of what to understand. You have to understand the facial expressions, like you talked about, the eyes and the smile. You have to understand OSINT. What are the platforms they're on today? And it changes all the time, right? It's always something a little different. And I mean, look at what this Chinese what is it, red whatever now that TikTok's, the bad guy, and they're going to go to the other Chinese platforms. There's always something new. And so you have this broad spectrum of things you have to understand. How does dark web work? How's all this work? And you combine all that together into an expertise, and it's not your average analyst, it's not your average investigator, it's not your average, law enforcement guy or anything like that. And so I think each part of this is super important as a as part of this discipline. And how, how can we make that better would be my biggest question. How can we convince, hey, there should be more money here, there should be more training here, there should be more therapy here, there should be more, support here. And that's a question that's vexed me for a long time because I think everybody on here's seen enough of this to handle and have our own little processes for it, but the majority of people have not. And it's a horrible thing, like you
Yeah.
said. The other thing I will say, though, this is something that's very, very important to me. Very important. 90% of people can agree that exploiting children and exploiting women or human beings as a whole is not acceptable. But we could have huge arguments about what drugs you could buy. We could have huge arguments over what guns you can buy, huge arguments over what knives you can buy. But generally speaking, if I say, hey, a 12-year-old girl shouldn't be sold into slavery, most people agree with that. So it's like, how do we go from there to fixing the problem? That's something that's
Yeah.
just vexed me for years. Like, how do we get there? So,
Well, one of the
And yeah, sorry,
no, go ahead.
sorry, Dave, I'm going down another rabbit trail, but Matt,
Let
have you guys, oh, blah, blah, blah.
well, before we get
Okay.
to, I just gotta say, I mean, this is not my forte. This is, my experience was in the military, and I do I want to plug this for a second because you mentioned it a couple times, Matt. That these are some of the worst, most heinous crimes imaginable, and I think of this, the tree to heaven can only grow with deep roots in hell, and so going after these folks gives you the privilege of having the of working with some of the best people out there that because they're willing to delve their hands into the dirty work of this. And one more thing for folks out there, because this is a big thing in our community and the OSINT community, is vicarious trauma. Coming from the
yeah, I
military.
said secondary traumatic stress. I think that's the old word for it, I think.
Yeah, I had to look
Yeah.
it up last night. I couldn't think of it.
Yeah.
I want to say visceral or something,
Yeah.
but vicarious trauma. And from my experience, I remember very vividly on a deployment, I saw an airstrike that went bad from this, from a country that's supposed to be one of our partners, and I saw a kid that was, 6 or 7 years old, like split in half. And another video of an ISIS suicide bomber who's carrying a baby because she could get past the checkpoint. It didn't bother me at the time. I could compartmentalize that. And it wasn't until I actually had kids years later that, the nightmares really started. And so I want to say to your point, Matt, is that you got to get ahead of this stuff. If you're in this and you're in the community, like you've got to talk to some folks and get this out of your system because um, trauma doesn't, it's not a switch that you flip. It's not something that you saw something and then, the next day you're changed forever. That's not exactly how this works. So I just had to plug that for everybody out there who's
Yeah, I would like to also kind of plug too, like um there are a few people that are in this community and like to be a hero or like there's the idea of heroism being something to romanticize or a status to achieve or something like that. I've just seen this over and over. And eventually, people that are enticed by that versus just the craft of investigation and changing an outcome should really think twice before they get into this kind of line of work, I think, because um, there's nothing but a lot of jadedness in general. You know, I think Matt was pretty kind about how he put it, but um, I'm like less kind about it. Like when somebody's like, "Yeah, I'm into it," and I don't hear a little hint of frustration that 8 out of 10 missing persons cases are an act of futility and somebody's already dead. Like that's no fun. Or um, seeing some of these young women just totally um, used like a marketplace is just devastating. And even young boys too, like where that's happening. More what you're seeing on the dark web stuff, but it's not for the faint of heart, and some of us just kind of stumbled into this work, but um, just be careful and know like if you got to get out, you got to get out of it.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because there are organizations and there are individuals within the space that are of the highest quality going. And then there are those that seek to build fame and fortune on the backs of this.
Yeah.
And we know we know, you all know what I mean. But being careful who you work with if you get into this, you can kind of tell people that are humble. Um, it's like you can like you're smiling and you're gregarious and outgoing and all that stuff. And I mean, I'm one of those that could turn it on and off like a switch. I'm outgoing now. After this, I'm probably going to be fairly introverted.
Yeah.
But there's always a little bit of an undercurrent where there's a severity or a heaviness to the human, where it's more somber. Like if it's a cowboy thing, I don't know. I've been around for a bit, and I don't remember last time I went yeehaw. Yeah, I've been involved in arrests and recovery of victims, and in a somber way, I will sit back and reflect and go, okay, I did a little bit of good today, but I'm not like yeehaw. Let's get champagne and some fantastic seafood tonight. Even right now, my
Yeah.
stomach feels talking about it. So I don't know. I can kind of tell a few of those things like that, and then the vicarious trauma, it's inevitable as is post-traumatic stress. Like mine was on the high end of moderate or low end of severe because my central nervous system was affected. That's what I was told. Um,
Hmm.
but then going back to it, that's why if, it's hard not to empathize, even though it's underneath because we compartmentalize well. What you said earlier, David, about your experiences, we have a saying, me and some of mine, where we'll be finishing up at night and they'll go, yeah, this is going to hurt real bad in a week. Because it often takes a week or two to manifest. While I'm doing it, I feel fine. I'm
Yeah.
not angry. I'm not sad. I'm like a vessel. So I'm not even me. It's like a method actor. I step out of myself and I'm a vessel and I just do what needs to be done. But a week later, I'm making Sunday dinner. And I'm like, oh, what's wrong? It's very
Yeah.
insidious, right?
I always felt like it's like an avatar in a video game. You're just doing what you got to do, and then later it's like, oh, that was real. That's a real
Yeah,
thing.
it feels surreal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one we were doing, and it was a child abuse forum, and it was really weird. This was super surreal, and there was some nasty stuff going on. And when this is one of the ones that led to my incident in May of 2023. It involved a lot of violence, and there was suicides on live stream. Again, no nudity of minors, but a lot of really bad stuff going on. Vulnerable young people being hurt bad. And I remember we were on one of the things and on a live stream, and then pivoted over to a dark web thing, and there was a radio station in one of the forums, and I'm like, okay, it doesn't work. So I remember this is like 2 in the morning at my old house. I remember I went outside and I came in and I forgot. Like I just went outside for a minute and came in. I could hear this weird music and it sounded like a really crappy Nine Inch Nails song, like industrial rock. And I'm like, oh, and then this German voice comes on, and it was a pedo radio station airing in like somewhere in Germany. I'm like, whoa. So I remember at the end of it, I said, stay on the call with a colleague of mine out of South America. I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, I'm pretty freaking far from okay right now, Skip, he says. So I said, okay, let's take a minute. Don't leave. And we sat for an hour. We had a drink and unpacked and kind of settled in. But you see, that was one of those ones I didn't think anything big was coming. So that's another thing is if you go in with your guard down, thinking this is just going to be like anything else, or it's not true. Be wary of that because that's got me a few times. And I think I went down a rabbit hole there, but I'll pause and I'll open it back up.
Now,
Yeah.
what you just said, those things make me sick. That is some of the worst stuff out there. I can't stand that stuff.
I don't care
Yeah.
for it.
Absolutely vile.
All right. All right. All right. Uh let's go
This
to
is, yeah.
tell us a success story, Matt.
Yeah.
Tell us where you caught the bad person or bad guy or whatever.
Okay, I could give you two quick victory laps. Okay, I don't like
Yeah.
victory laps, a poor choice of words, but two two good days in the field. Um, by invitation, law enforcement, me and a small team that I picked were able to. So, in the long story short, a sex trafficker out of Arizona was grooming and manipulating a barely 18, very vulnerable. So she had some cognitive diversities going on, barely 18. And he was attempting to lure her out of Toronto to Arizona. Now her parents caught on, And I got screenshots of the messages where she said "bae" or "babe." My parents brought some guy into my house to talk to me about human trafficking. They found plane tickets. He had sent her plane tickets. So they took her passport. He was sending her instructions on address of where to go to get 24-hour passport, along with a wire transfer for the money to get it. So this was really serious. So we were able on our end to go through the social media profiles of the trafficker and close associates. And we had a limited amount of information and work that was provided, so some locations and whatnot. We were able to do a couple of things that did help lead to his apprehension. So we were able to construct somewhat of a pattern of life. So we were finding nightclubs that he's frequenting, and we had a bit of a schedule for his trips to Vegas, plus where he was staying when he was in Vegas and all this stuff. Importantly, he was a felon. So we did find two posts of him holding, loading, and firing. One was a sidearm, and the other was an AR-15 by the look of it. And they were dated well after his conviction. So that was actually a breach of his release conditions. So they were able, as I recall it, to use that to get him quick. And then they were able to go and find some other things that involved the pattern of life, like activity at the one motel in Vegas. Ultimately, what ended up happening was, and I don't know the sentence, but he was apprehended and convicted, and the girl remains safe with her family in Ontario, Canada. So that's one of the guy. We got him, and we got one of his female associates, but he was the primary. And that was a heavy on social media, that one. The other one was Christmas break 2022, at the request of a New York City law enforcement. We were asked to help locate a missing, endangered, just turned 14-year-old female. She went missing at 13 years of age in like August. This was December. Using open source methods, I can't be too specific on what we did to do this, but open source methods, some social media. We used one or two subscription tools, and I'm not exaggerating. This will probably never happen again the rest of my life. But in a very short amount of time, I'm going to say like 2 to 3 hours, we had her location. So she was missing from New York City. We located an apartment building, a public housing complex in the Bronx, and a church that we suspect she was using the Wi-Fi for her phone at. And we sent what we had. We jumped on quick calls, a couple questions on the workup. And then about a week or two later, got an email from the agent that they had recovered her safely. She remains with family. The male and female traffickers are in custody looking at, a fairly heavy sentence.
Nice.
So those were 2 good days there.
Nice.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
So that felt pretty good.
It was one of those Merry Christmas days, I guess. Again, it's somber though. It's not like yeehaw. It's just sort of like a sigh of relief to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do enjoy it. I feel good, but it's not like winning a Super Bowl or anything where it's just sheer like yeehaw. I'm super happy. It's just it is.
Right.
I feel good, but it's a somber thing for me personally.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it there. We'll end on a high note at least, or a somber note. But yeah, thank you, Matt. This is a great conversation, one that actually needs to be had more often, I think. And yeah, thanks to ATII. Thank you to CACI, their Dark Blue Suite. We're all partnered together to go after some of these threats, and more. So subscribe, like, follow us on social media for the latest updates, latest podcasts. We got to have you back. We're gonna make this a series. Forgot to mention that in the opening. But please, I'll do this for you, Matt. The ATI is a nonprofit, so go to followmoneyfightslavery.org/donate, give to the mission, and help them help the community. So I'll give the
Thank
last.
you so much for sharing, Matt.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for having me today. Thank you to anyone who tuned in. I hope you learned some some interesting and some good things on here. And one more time, I want to thank my friends at CACI Dark Blue and at ShadowDragon for all of your the manpower and the personal supports and relationships and the power of these tool sets, which are simple, easy to use for people like me. That's very important. But certainly on a daily basis, your personal efforts and the tools that you provide are certainly helping with the mission, including the case studies I just rattled off right now. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you guys.